Here's Erskine.
It's a great pleasure having perhaps the most accurate of the prognosticators on with us, Robert Chapman, the publisher of the International Forecaster. His accuracy has been unbelievable. Gold closed yesterday at 117.40, silver 17.43. He said, buy silver, it's going up to $20. Does that look like a good deal? Indeed it does. Now, we've got some very, very good news today. One thing is that they're proposing new rules for the ratings firms, and Representative Alan Grayson of Florida announced that H.R. 1207, that is the Federal Reserve Transparency Act, it only runs 2 pages. That's essentially Ron Paul's bill, Representative Ron Paul's bill, to have an auditing of the Federal Reserve. It'll be in Committee on Financial Services September 25th. Has 290 co-sponsors. Senate Bill S-604 has 25 sponsors. That's Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders of Vermont. That's the bill that is a mirror image of the House bill, and it only has 25 sponsors. So we need to be in touch with our senators and our representatives to see that this passes. It's a Transparency Act on the Federal Reserve, the first time to have it audited. Mr. Chapman, welcome to Erskine Overnight, my friend.
Well, thank you very much. It's nice to be here again.
Those are both good stories, that they're going to have new rules for the ratings firms, and that this bill, which you've been talking about for the last couple of months, H.R. 1207, is finally getting a hearing at the Committee on Financial Services. Those are both good news stories, aren't they?
They are, especially 1207, because I believe when the public finds out what the Fed has been up to, I think that they'll be very disturbed, as will Wall Street and everybody in the country. And I think there'll then be a move to do away with the Federal Reserve, not give it more responsibilities, which is what Wall Street and banking want to happen. And it's probably because it's a private corporation run and owned by 12 Federal Reserve regional banks. And it's a move to totally consolidate the power of the Federal Reserve over everything financial. And that's bad. And I hope that the bill is passed in its present form, and that I hope that the Senate goes along with it. I think the chances are very good. With 290 co-sponsors, that means that the bill is veto-proof, and that means that if it's passed in both houses, then the president won't be able to veto it, unless, some of the people fall out. And I don't think that'll happen. I think this is a very positive thing for congressmen to do. They're naturally irate, like everybody else is, when questions are asked to the Fed, and they say, we can't tell you, it's a state secret. I mean, the audacity, the arrogance of these people is mind-blowing. And I believe that it'll change our whole system and the way it works. It'll cause transparency. It'll expose who is behind the deliberate collapse of our financial system, and that's really what it is. As far as the other thing with the SEC, what they should do is execute their own rules on naked shorting and stop it. They still haven't done it. And what was the other factor that you brought out?
Well, there were two things that they were going to do on the SEC. They were doing new rules for ratings firms. In other words, they're blaming a lot of it on ratings firms, going to make it a lot easier for them for people to sue the ratings firms. Because even while things were dropping down, even though they knew, they still kept the ratings of these firms up there ridiculously high. So they're trying to bring some honesty to the ratings of these firms, hopefully.
Well, first of all, as you know, as a subscriber to the International Forecaster, that was the first thing we said. First of all, the Fed engineered this thing. The bankers work with them along with the stock brokerage firms, many of which are now bankers. And, fees that are charged by S&P, Fitch, and Moody's, these fees are really coercive in nature, and it works both ways. With the smaller firms, they say, well, look, we've done this report on you, and if you don't pay for it, then we're going to change the report. And believe me, it happens. And how do I know it happens? I've been involved with it. Second of all, they're beholden to the larger firms in the United States because they need some sort of a rating service, and the raters exist only because the companies want them to, so you don't very often see two bad reports. It's a system that has to operate separate and apart from doing business with the people who you're rating. And so this has been a long time coming. There is a court case, and it is a class action, and a judge threw the complaints, the challenges to complaints by the rating services out of court a couple of weeks ago, and they're going to have to go to trial. And I think they should all be put out of business. I think they're a bunch of crooks. I think that they've been misrating for a long time. And, you know, when the debacle happened with the collateralized debt obligations, when that happened, I published and said, well, why hasn't any of the professional investors, which is mostly the people who were involved in buying these things, why haven't they taken civil action or criminal action against the sellers of this toxic waste and the raters and the Federal Reserve? Because they're supposed to be looking over what these people are doing. And they obviously weren't, or they were part of it, which in fact they were part of it. And so we have here a situation where I thought, because no lawsuits had emanated, especially from Europe, where 60% of this toxic waste was placed, I think that the banks and the brokerage houses that were involved in it were all involved in it together. They wanted to bring the system down. That's why there hadn't been any lawsuits. And the lawsuit that we see now is being brought by people who are not in the mainstream of the elitist clique that run Wall Street and banking and the Federal Reserve. And it was bound to come. But, you know, why hasn't, you know, major banks and what you'd call savings and loans in Europe, why haven't they filed? You know, it doesn't seem odd to you when a crime's been committed, whether it's civil or criminal, nobody goes after anybody? No. There's something dramatically wrong here. And this is going to bring it all out. But those firms should all be shut down, all their assets confiscated, and all the people who got screwed should be paid off with their money. And then they should go after the banks and the brokerage houses that work with them and package this stuff, and the shareholders of the privately owned Federal Reserve.
Well, you absolutely have stated that the reason they're bringing it down is to institute a one world government. So when you're looking at this and you're saying, well, is this happening by coincidence? And my friend Jim Marr says, things don't happen that often by coincidence. They're normally planned. You've said the same thing, Mr. Chapman. And there is a couple, and I was watching Bloomberg today, I believe the company's Donan Egan or something like that, which is an independent rating service that's paid for by the investors as opposed to being paid for by the company.